What is a transgender dance festival? I having never been.
So that is when USAID or USAID's companion star, National Endowment for Democracy, or other related NGOs will, fund an event in the form of a sort of cultural exchange, and they will bring together people from that country to come to a dance festival that's comprised of transgender individuals and is intended to both create a sense of unity within the transgender population there, and to expose and normalize and curry favor with other parts of the demographics there in order to expand the network node of U.S. entities who are working with the activists and leaders there.
What American interest is preserved or protected or advanced by pushing transgenderism or any kind of sexual politics or family politics, including family planning? Why is it our business how many kids other countries have? I've always been confused by that. Like, what is that? Why are we doing that?
I wish that was rhetorical, but and I do believe in many instances it is ideological excess, driven to madness. But give an example from just a few months ago. I believe it was this August this year. There was a prime minister in Bangladesh who was basically ousted in a sort of military coup coupled with a color revolution. And Gray Zone News, Max Blumenthal's outlet, published this report that I've been talking about a lot for the past week, because it's just a really, really clean example of all of the different facets of the dynamics I'm talking about, which is, so basically starting in about 2018 through 2020, it appeared that U.S. statecraft was not particularly pleased with Sheikh Hasina winning this, the prime minister winning the election, and baseline assessments were submitted to the State Department about how to prop up the opposition group, the Bangladeshi National Party, the BNP, which was considered more favorable to U.S. interests. The leaked documents don't get too in the nitty gritty about what U.S. national interest is served, but there were many conflicts between that Bangladeshi prime minister and the U.S. foreign policy establishment. For example, it was revealed in WikiLeaks that Hillary Clinton, while she was Secretary of State, threatened to have the IRS do an audit of her son while she lived in the U.S. And that prime minister has come out publicly and said that she believed that she was overthrown because of or basically there was a conflict around the construction of a U.S. military base in the region, which is a very common conflict that we have. Oftentimes, foreign countries don't like having a big fat U.S. military base installed, on.
They don't want foreign troops on their soil. Who does?
Right. They don't want 500 acres of their land. They don't want to provoke, foreign powers. This is what's playing out in Romania with George Askew and the cancellation of the elections, and
it's just like a giant NATO base right now.
Right. Well, they're building the Europe's largest NATO base currently, which faces straight out at the Black Sea at Crimea. But there was this, but she had been refusing to build a U.S. military base. So let's just. But as I walk through this, let me just make some assumptions and make it a harder issue than, or something a little bit more, I guess, accessible. Let's just say it really is vital to U.S. national interests to build that military base in Bangladesh to counter Chinese influence, and the Bangladeshi prime minister doesn't want to do it. And so our foreign policy planners decide we need to do regime change. And whether or not you agree that's a good or an evil thing to do, I'm not even weighing into the morality of it. What if it is the declared or discrete policy of the U.S. government, the State Department and the White House and the National Security Council all agree this government, we should pursue regime change, all options to destabilize that country in order to weaken the existing government and to build up our network of democratic institutions and activists in order to either win the next election or in order to, do a color revolution style, ousting where the prime minister has to flee in a helicopter. And what was done in this case in Bangladesh, and these leaked documents from the gray zone show this in gratuitous detail, is that the National Endowment for Democracy's Republican arm, the International Republican Institute, they have 4 core forces, but 2 of them are political branches. There's the NDI, the National Democratic Institute for Democrats, and there's the IRI, the International Republican Institute for Republicans. And what the IRI submitted to the State Department in 2019, 2020, after they got walloped trying to back the Bangladeshi National Party in the recent past election, was a plan to destabilize Bangladesh politics. That's a direct quote, destabilize Bangladesh politics. By working with, they listed 170 pro-democracy activists, 304 key informants, and then they did a baseline assessment of the different ethnic groups and cultural cleavage points that they could exploit in order to effectively, either destabilize the country's politics or prop up the political alternative. And in the process of doing that, they sought the LGBT population, two Bangladeshi ethnic minority groups, and young students and student groups who had already been protesting earlier that year because of a local politics issue there, and they noted that rap music was popular and young people were listening to rap music in Bangladesh. So what do? They turned around and they took U.S. taxpayer funds. They get 100% of their money from the State Department, and they work closely with USAID. They actually administer USAID programs all over Bangladesh and all over the world. And they funded Bangladeshi rap groups to produce songs and music videos insinuating that people should take to the streets and do street protests, and the classic peaceful protest that's has the upside of being a riot, and one of in IRI's baseline assessment submitted to the State Department, they talked about how one of the songs that they paid for was designed to sow resentment at the sitting government, and basically undermine the popularity of the government. So you have one sponsored song to get people to take the streets, another sponsored rap song to get people to distrust their government, and then basically the baseline assessment revealed that these groups were the ones who would be receptive. Those were the contacts in the region. They do field work when they do these baseline assessments. What if the baseline assessment or the strategic assessment happens to reveal that the highest ROI for soft power projection is with very unseemly groups and activities? This is, for example, how we end up funding terrorist groups and paramilitaries, and very extreme, because oftentimes when you have a popular government, it's the coalition of the fringes and the extremes and the weirdos and the criminals and the prostitutes. This was in an NED memo in 2009 for Cuba, where the National Endowment for Democracy, they have something called the Journal of Democracy, and they talked about this exact phenomenon, that they might be able to mobilize the Afro-Cuban community to leveraging racial animus against the mostly white Cuban government, and taking note of proclivities for, I think it was prostitution, crime, and drugs, and how USAID might be able to swoop in and mobilize these people because a lot of them are really unemployed, and also USAID should fund the rap groups there because these populations all listen to rap, and they did. And this is another great gray zone.
You're making the hair on my arms go up because you're describing what's happened in our country.
Yes.
You're describing the 2017 Charlottesville march, the Nazi march. You're describing what happened on January 6th. You're describing the riots after George Floyd was murdered. You're describing the rise of rap music and drugs in our city, and all of it. You're describing, trainee story hour, and you're describing all the trends in our country that seem to arise out of nowhere, whose net effect is to destabilize America, to fray the social fabric, to divide people from each other, to make them easier to control, and in the case of Trump's first term, to undermine the White House, right? I mean, I don't know that any of that's true, but like what you're describing that we did in Bangladesh is what's happened here, and so it raises the question, like, was that all by design also? And of course it was, right?
Well, there's a lot there. USAID gave
like, am I crazy to ask that?
No, not at all. I mean, that is, to me, the final blow. It's bad, and there's the moral question about whether to do this sort of dirty work abroad, and that comes down to different schools of foreign policy thought and to different views on the relative morality of different ways of attacking the issue of U.S. soft power influence abroad. But then there is the breaking of the firewall, where our foreign policy hounds are never supposed to bite the owner who feeds them, and that is, I mean, that is to me why this is a no-brainer, the reforms that are happening.
But do you think it's? I mean, look, just to go through them, the 2017 Charlottesville march, where all of a sudden out of nowhere there are all these Nazis. Like, who knew we had so many Nazis in our country? Right? And guys, I'm thinking one particular.
Yeah, USAID has never funded Nazis, by the way.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
right. So, but like all out of nowhere, Trump gets elected, and all of a sudden, Charlottesville, Virginia, home of UVA, not a right-wing town, there are all these people showing up, led by a couple of people who are just so obviously feds. It's like not even a question in my mind. And they're like marching with candles, and we're going to restore the Fourth Reich or whatever. And then the next day is used to delegitimize Trump. And we're supposed to think that's like all organic. I mean, that sounds like exactly what groups like USAID do in other countries.
Well, I don't know about the Charlottesville case. I can see enough domestic antibodies on that with the FBI and whatnot. And the fact is,
well, I'm not saying USAID did it. I'm just saying it's the same template.
Oh, right. Oh, well, the ability for the battering ram of our cloak and dagger dark arts, only supposed to operate abroad, to be laundered at home,
yes,
is really the reason that I believe the current open heart surgery is a no-brainer. And I fully support the total abolition of USAID as an agency and tucking it under state and putting it through, having it mend. And then if at some point it needs to be rolled out, spun out into a different independent agency, again, with reforms in place and the appropriate, staffing structure, we can have that conversation at a later time. There is the domestic one is a huge one. There's so many data points there. I think it's going to be terrifying to a lot of people who are just now experiencing this. But I do sort of want to close the loop on this foreign side, because my concern is when you try to attack these things at the level of there's no U.S. interest that's served in it at all. It's totally crazy. You're going to encounter very strange layers of resistance trying to attack it from that argument. So here's an example I've been giving this week, and I'll hit you with the thought experiment. Let's just assume, and I have no inside knowledge about this. I don't talk to folks at that level or anything, but Venezuela has Trump has had a very contentious relationship with the government of Venezuela during his first term. We declared Juan Guaido the sitting president of the elected president. He was standing ovation from both sides of the aisle. I could see a situation where this White House, where President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, either in a declared or discreet fashion, seek to deploy U.S. soft power institutions to pursue a policy of regime change in Venezuela. Again, I have no inside knowledge about that.
I do have inside knowledge,
okay.
And they've been working on that for years.
Sure.
And there are Americans in Venezuela, fact, because I talked to one of them. As of last year, there were Americans in Venezuela working to overthrow that government.
Right.
So that's true.
But I'm going to give a narrow example here, but the problem fundamentally that I'm describing is fractal across all of this waste, fraud, and abuse we're seeing. What if the State Department and together with its new USAID function puts out basically, a request for proposals to all the different NGOs for how best to capacity build civil society institutions and activists and people who will be willing to, spread pro-democracy media and take to the streets and protest against the police and live dual lives effectively as, working with effectively U.S. spycraft while nominally being Venezuelan citizens, or doing the daring and dangerous deeds of, transporting supplies despite, Venezuelan counterintelligence monitoring them. And what if the strategic analysis or the baseline analysis that comes back from these NGOs is, well, the transgender population in Venezuela. And I know nothing about this in Venezuela, but I'm just using this as an example for everywhere. What if the cold hard fact is the demographic in that country that is most effective at destabilizing that country's democratically that country's government, or that will be most the highest return on investment for foreign assistance funds given? What if $2.7 million to a series of 12 different transgender dance festivals, if the analysis reveals that we need 5 million votes, to win this next election that we don't have, and everybody who converts from being heteronormative to transgender effectively goes from being a Maduro person or to a pro-US one, and everyone who normalizes or is or believes that transgender people being oppressed by the government are more likely to vote against the government, you could see a cynical, self-serving, cold hard, calculated decision for a MAGA State Department to fund transgender dance festivals. And this is important to keep in mind. In Bangladesh, it was the IRI who funded that. It was the Republicans who funded the transgender dance festivals and rap groups. Republicans are not known for loving rap.
But it's John McCain. I mean, McCain ran it for years. Right. I mean, they're actually all for that.
But Trump is a winner. Trump likes to win. And think of the feather in the cap that it would be for Marco Rubio to be the person who brought democracy defense. What I'm saying is leave aside the transgender issue. This is going to happen in everywhere. And I think people just don't understand that aid is a dirty deed.
With Donald Trump returning to the White House, this country has a unique opportunity, maybe our last opportunity, to save ourselves from the anti-American and anti-human left. But our efforts may be stymied by the deep state. That's what happened to the first Trump term. Permanent Washington stands in the way of all efforts to improve the lives of ordinary Americans. And right now they are scheming to do the same thing to the second Trump administration. They are determined to keep their stranglehold on power, regardless of elections, anti-democratically. That is a fact. So what do you do to fight them? How do you defeat the deep state? Well, one way you can is by supporting the Heritage Foundation, which is in Washington and understands exactly how it works in such a way that they're a threat and they're under attack. You know who's effective because they're the ones under attack. Heritage has a comprehensive plan to dismantle permanent Washington and restore the country to its democratic foundations. It's important. Visit heritage.org/Tucker to learn more and to support this critical effort. And when you make a gift today, you get a free pocket constitution to make certain that you are equipped with the founding principles on your person at all times. It's amazing to read it. Again, that's heritage.org/Tucker. I agree with that. I think I have a macro problem with this, which is, one, it's not at all clear that overthrowing Maduro is in America's interest. I think there's a loud exile community in Florida that wants it. More foreigners who've come here bringing their stupid feuds into our country and using political donations to make the U.S. government settle their scores. It's get out of here. This is totally not our problem. Leave us alone. That's how I feel. about the Cubans, the Venezuelans, who all of whom I like personally, but like these are not our problems. And I feel that way about the Gaza thing. It's like, take it to Gaza, okay?
Yeah.
Not our problem. I think it's a fair, as an American, I think it's a fair position to have. But so there's that, like, is this actually in our interest, or are we just being paid to care about this?
Yeah.
Two, there is a moral quality to it. If you're going to say the United States is better than other countries, then you can't just, assassinate people you don't like. You can't just like totally destroy their social fabric. You have to make a straightforward, honorable case and allow the people of that country to decide using democratic means, because you're for democracy. And if you're not for democracy, then don't say you are. And I do think that like there's something so morally corrupting about the means that our foreign policy establishment uses to achieve its goals, that it actually does affect our domestic life. January 6th was an op by I think primarily by DOD is my impression. And it like kind of wrecked our country and put all these people in prison. And like, who would even think to do something like that? Well, they've been trained for years doing that sort of thing in faraway nations. That's my view.
Right.